Good morning, and hey now, PASW staff, clients, and friends joining us. Welcome to Film Scoring Mondays. Of course, Mondays when we look at an iconic film scene and score, and I take out the music, and you guys give me your own score, and we become film composers. So play along if you haven't yet. There's, it's never too late to start. And this time, I'd like if you could get it to me by Tuesday. Because some of the editing is taking a little bit longer. Also, there's some copyright stuff, so I don't want you to have to worry about that. But if you get it to me by tomorrow, that would be great. And we'll see the results on Friday. So we're going to kind of look, we've talked about directors and composers working together. We've talked about Alfred Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann, and we looked at the great score North by Northwest. And they've, Hitchcock and Herrmann have worked together, collaborated on so many movies. We've talked about John Williams and Steven Spielberg. We looked at Jaws. We looked at, they've collaborated so many times, and it's usually a slam dunk. We also looked at Fellini and Nino Rota, where he would always choose Nino Rota as his composer. So directors have a vision. They're the head of this whole, movie that they've been hired to do, and they like a composer that they feel a personal connection to. So that's why they usually, the composer puts into music what their vision possibly could be. And as we know, music can really change the nature of a movie, make it, sometimes save it. The soundtrack. So today we're going to talk about another collaboration. We're going to look at the very famous 1989 film Batman. So the collaboration I'm talking about is, of course, Tim Burton and Danny Elfman. We have not talked about them yet. They've collaborated several times, and they go back to the 80s with Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That's 1985, and we're going to talk about how the music and the score came to be. This was the first huge film score and huge film for for Tim Burton. They were both pretty young, and they had worked on Beetlejuice together, and the year before. And that was fine. But now Warner Brothers, they had a budget of $35 million. They had to work with Jack Nicholson and other huge movie stars. Luckily for them, it turned out great. It made $400 million. But I think it was a pretty scary event. They did want to shoot it in Culver City, but instead they did it in England. So let's go over to England and see where Pinewood Studios, and this is where they filmed the Batcave and Gotham City and the entire thing. So this isn't Ulysses. For the most part, we know what Batman's about. That he's a bat by night and a superhero, and the villain is Joker, and he's trying to it's the same plot in every movie, and he's there's a love interest. And Batman kind of started this whole, which we're still kind of obsessed about, this whole superhero kind of phenomenon that's still going on. Dozens and thousands of remakes going on. But 1989, it kind of started, especially with the merchandising, and it had two soundtracks. So Danny Elfman was the composer, obviously, but then Prince did a whole album and separately, and both. All the music is in there together, but it was kind of like two different soundtracks going on. I don't think Tim Burton liked what Prince did, and I think they just kind of had two different. I don't know. I think it works. I like what Prince did, but who cares? So if we think of late 80s, and in particular 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down. That's the end of communism in Europe. So that's a huge thing. With technology, Game Boy is first out. Also, HD TV comes out in Japan for the first time. That's going to change how we watch, movies today. And then The Simpsons premieres in 1989. And if we think of that relates to Batman in a sense of maybe it's adults becoming kids again. The era of cartoons and also and comic books. it's becoming elevated content where it's not just for kids. It's going to really be for adults again. So late 80s is maybe a regression in some ways, but also in a way to find, things that made you happy as a kid. So there's nothing wrong with that. So that's what's going on in 89. They didn't really want Tim Burton because he was, not really an experienced director yet, even though he had done Beetlejuice and, Pee-wee. But he got his friend Danny Elfman, who had collaborated. And of course, Danny Elfman is from Oingo Boingo, and that's kind of his claim to fame. But he wasn't a film composer per se, because he didn't know how to score music. He didn't really know how to read music. We've talked about that. It's not super important. But, when you write for a film score, it can be a daunting task because really you just have your keyboard, and that's kind of how he wrote it, and that's how I think he still writes it. I mean, you have your MIDI setup and you have your keyboard and you write your music into the computer. The computer has a sequencer which it records the music, and if you record to a click track, you can usually it'll notate the music for you. And he worked a lot with Steve Bartek, who was in his band, and Steve Bartek went to UCLA, studied composition, so he knew how to orchestrate it. So he orchestrated all of Elfman's themes in Batman because they're orchestral big dark themes. And what Tim Burton liked about Dan Elfman, and which I think a lot of people do, including me, that he knows how to do light and dark music very well at the same time. And that's his influence, he says, from Bernard Herrmann and from Nino Rota. So it's we have talked about those guys, but he actually points them out as people that have influenced his music. And I think with today's assignment, I really want to focus on something that we're going to try it. It's not, you don't have to, but we're going to try to look at hit points. A hit point is exactly what it sounds like. If you have a scene that's scored, at the end of the scene, there's a climax. So by the end of it, the director is going to say to the composer, so at this part of the scene, I want the music to get really big, okay? With the scene we're going to look at Batman, this is the very final scene of it. This is when Kim Basinger, the love interest, is going back to Batman's house later, and Alfred says, he'll be late tonight, because she knows his true identity. And let's take a look at the scene. This is the very last clip.
Mr. Wayne told me to tell you that he might be a little late.
Oh. I'm not a bit surprised.
So very cool, epic march-like theme that's, it's a really great score and great theme music. So you can see the hit point is it's building, right? We see the soundtrack building because the camera crane is going way up. And then that last shot is going to be, in people's minds as they leave the theater. So it's got to be effective. If we do something, the wrong music, or if we make it camp, that's okay, but I don't know if I know that's what Tim Burton didn't want. He didn't want the script to be camp-like. And I think people were also confused that Michael Keaton was cast as Batman because he was a comedic actor. So they wanted to take Batman seriously, and I think it worked out, I guess. Okay, so a hit point. So if we can find a score, so around the 30-second mark of this scene maybe might be a nice way to. So if when you listen, see if you can find something. Obviously, it doesn't have to be at the beginning, but let's just see. I mean, like I've said, we take this seriously. So I'm trying to kind of elevate this with each assignment each week. So see if we can find a hit point where the music really climaxes with the image of the movie. That last scene. Let's see if we can do that. I think we can. Let's watch it without any music. Still pretty cool. I mean, it's with the city sounds, it's still cool. But for the last scene of a movie, it's going to need music. It can't just end with just city noise. Unless it's like a foreign film or something more experimental. It's going to need a score. So we're going to have to come up with that. And I think you guys can. So get it to me by tomorrow if you can. And we'll look at this and we'll see the results on Friday. So have a great rest of the day and see you tomorrow.